Why do you do what you do?
To see what will happen. Some programs you cannot predict, right? You cannot predict how they're going to end. You have to run them. Well, I believe that truth will save the world. I believe that. So you speak truthfully and you watch what happens and you take your consequences, and maybe you hope and have some faith that in the final analysis, things will work out in your favor, but perhaps they will and perhaps they won't. But that's faith, eh? That's faith. Faith isn't believing in things you regard as ridiculous, sacrificing your intellect. It's a decision. When you listen to a profound piece of music, one that sort of spans the whole emotional experience, it's not happy. Happy is elevator music, and probably you just shouldn't listen to that at all, right? And you think, why? Well, it's harmless, it's treacly, it's sweet, it's simple, it lacks depth, it's shallow, that's a problem. It doesn't have that deep sense of awe and horror, I would say, that is characteristic of the best of all music. You listen to some simple music, so-called. Hank Williams is a good example. The blues cowboy from the 50s who died of alcoholism when he was 27 and whose voice sounds like an 80-year-old man. Simple melody, but there's nothing simple in the song and in the voice. It's deep, it's like the blues. It's like black blues in the States from the 20s, and it was certainly influenced by that tradition. There's this admission of a deep suffering at the same time as you get the beautiful transcendence of the music. And that's meaning, that's awful in the most fundamental sense, but you need an antidote to suffering, and it has to be deep. And deep moves you tectonically, and it's not a trivial thing. But that's better than happiness. And maybe if you're lucky while you're pursuing that and while you're immersed in it, you get to be happy, and you should fall on your knees and be grateful for that when it happens. It's a gift. It really is a gift. And it comes upon you unexpectedly, your happiness, But you aim to climb uphill to the highest peak you can possibly envision. And that's better than happiness.
Why did you include terribly?
Well, for example, now when I go, wherever I go in the world, people come up to me and they're usually, I wouldn't say they're happy to see me. They're often in tears, and they often have a pretty rough story to relate. They were suicidal or nihilistic or homicidal or trapped, desperate, and they tell me that real fast. And then they say, I've overcome that to a large degree, and thank you for that. And you think, well, that's really something to have that happen over and over. In some ways, you might think, well, how could anything better possibly happen to you than to have people come up to you all over the world, strangers, and open themselves up like that, like they're old friends so quickly. But at the same time, it's an awful thing, because you see, even in the revelation of their triumph, the initial depth of their despair. So I wouldn't change that. But it's not nothing. And it's certainly not just happiness. It's better than happiness, but it's almost unbearable. And so if you want to help someone, the best way to help someone is not to give them advice, but to listen to them.
What is the best way, if I've got a friend in my life or a partner that I want to encourage to come out of their place of despair into a better place, how do I effectively do that without overpowering them or stifling them or making them feel inadequate, which is sometimes the consequence of trying to change someone you love?
Mm-hmm. Well, example's good. But then I would say disabuse yourself of the notion that you know what is best for this person. You don't, not only do you not know, you actually don't want that responsibility for two reasons. Let's say they do what you say and something good happens to them. Well, whose victory is that? Yours or theirs? And if it's yours, did you just steal it? And then let's say they fail following your advice. Well, they pay the price for that. And you can skip away merrily and say, well, I should have spoke more carefully. It's like, you don't mess about with people's destiny. You do not know where they're headed. Now, having said that, you do what you're doing in this interview, in this podcast. You ask people questions, real questions, like, how are you feeling? Oh, I'm not doing so good today. Well, what's up? What's going on? And you can't think, well, I'm going to ask questions to lead this person in a particular direction, because that's the same game, the same instrumental game. You have to see what it is that you want to know. I see this when people ask me questions after my lectures, Now and then, or during a Q&A, now and then people get up and they'll ask a real question. It's part of the ongoing dialogue. Something struck them. They stand up. There's something they really want to know. It's an honest question. And that goes real well. But not infrequently, someone stands up with a little prepared speech that's packaged as a question. So I get this from Christian traditionalists fairly frequently. They get up and they ask me about my religious convictions, but really what they want to do is corner me into admitting that I should accept Jesus Christ as my Savior and join a particular, let's say, denomination. It's not a question. It's just a manipulation. And so your questions, like your statements, your questions should be honest. And if you ask people questions and you really listen, they will untangle themselves. And that's partly why people love to be attended to, Like, if I meet people on the street, I ask them their name. They're all usually flustered when they come up to me. They don't really want to interrupt me, and then they're flustered. And the first thing I do is shake their hand and ask them their name. And I listen, Not that good at remembering names, but I listen to it. And they know how to say their name. And so it kind of settles them down. And then it sort of marks them out as a person against the background, And then if I pay attention to them and listen, they will tell me something in like 10 seconds that I need to know. Because they have something to say, And then if you listen, people tell you what they have to say, and then you get wise because you collect all that. And so you want to help someone. Well, first of all, you decide that you're aiming towards help, right? And that you do that in the spirit of ignorance. This is what every good clinician learns, is I don't know where you're headed. I don't know what's wrong with you. This is a hard problem, man. It's like, what's your problem? I don't know what your problem is. So let's find that out first, and then let's find out. One thing you can ask people, this is actually useful in an argument with someone you love. They're upset with you. What are your preconditions for satisfaction? Now, I wouldn't state it like that. It's like, if I could give you what you wanted right now in the context of this argument, and I wasn't doing it in a manipulative way, what is it that I would have to say or do that would in principle satisfy you? And that's a hard question, And the person might say, well, I think you should apologize about this, and then I will say, what words should I use? And they'll say, well, if you loved me, you'd know. And I would say, no, I'm stupid and ignorant, and I don't know what the right words are to satisfy you. So why don't you give me a hand with that, and I'll utter them inelegantly and awkwardly in a good faith demonstration of my commitment to peace. And that won't be so good, because maybe it would have been better if I came up with it myself, but maybe next time I can do slightly better. And that works. It requires the person who's after you to think through the question even of whether there's anything that could be said or done that would satisfy them. And if the answer to that is no, well, probably the relationship is over. But certainly, the person that they're accusing has been put in an absolutely impossible position. But usually, almost inevitably, if the person meditates on it for a bit, there is something that would satisfy them that can be negotiated, as long as they're willing to give you the opportunity to do it, stupidly and badly. So, listening, man.